When the political crisis erupted, they cut the embassy off from the outside world by crashing its communication network. But this was not an external attack. It was a betrayal from within. The traitors had accounted for everything, except for one thing: the young IT technician working in the building's basement. She realized that the anomaly in the network wasn't triggered by an enemy, but by an old ghost protocol forgotten by her own agency. The American embassy in the city of Viridia was a fortress. High walls, barbed wire, and the silhouettes of Marines on the roof were all designed to protect the fragile world of diplomacy inside. But that morning, the real war was not with the angry crowd outside, but within the building's own nervous system. In the Command Information Center, CIC, the heart of the embassy, the massive screens flickered for a moment and then filled with nonsensical characters and distorted images. The encrypted satellite link to Washington was severed. Red alarms began to flash silently. "Situation report," Ambassador Thompson roared. "What's hitting us?" Communications Director Thorne leaned over his console with a confident air. "The host country's cyber army, sir. An expected move. I'm initiating standard countermeasure protocols. We'll be back online in a few minutes." Thorne was known for his coolness under pressure and his mastery of technology. Everyone in the room was sure that he would get the situation under control. But as the minutes passed and Thorne's team frantically typed on their keyboards, the network remained dead. Meanwhile, far from the bright lights and polished floors of the CIC, in a small, cluttered server room in the building's basement, Anya Sharma was doing her usual job. She was the help desk girl. Her job was to solve diplomats' "my printer isn't working" problems, to reset forgotten passwords. For the high-level agents and executives, she was almost invisible. But Anya's world was the old diagnostic monitors in that server room, and those monitors were telling a very different story from the bright screens upstairs. Anya didn't see the network as crashed. There was no incoming attack traffic. On the contrary, the network was redirecting all traffic inwards, creating a closed loop that isolated itself from the outside world. And all this activity was concentrated around a dusty, unused server rack in the deepest part of the basement. This was not like an attack, it was like a defense mechanism, but a defense of whom against what? Anya called the CIC on the intercom to report her findings. "Director Thorne, this is Sharma from the basement. I'm seeing strange activity on the network. It doesn't look like an external attack. It's as if the system—" Thorne cut her off. "Sharma, we're in the middle of a cyber war. I don't have time to deal with your basement anomalies. Stay at your post." As Anya listened to the sound of the intercom cutting off, she felt that something was wrong. She had to solve the secret of that old server rack that no one cared about. Using her low-level clearance, she accessed the old infrastructure diagrams of the embassy, and she saw that the server rack was part of a Cold War-era contingency plan called Protocol Chimera. The narrator continues, as the secret of Protocol Chimera is revealed. In the 1980s, strategists at the Pentagon feared a sudden nuclear attack on Washington and the collapse of the chain of command. For this scenario, they designed a radical contingency plan, Protocol Chimera. If an embassy lost contact with the Central Command under specific crisis conditions, this protocol would automatically activate. The protocol would cut all of the embassy's external connections, create a self-sufficient, hyper-secure internal network, and begin broadcasting an encrypted "Are you still there?" signal over forgotten, old frequencies to other surviving units. The goal was to allow a surviving embassy to turn into a temporary command center. However, the protocol was deemed too risky and autonomous and was officially canceled in the 1990s, but its hardware was left idle in many old embassy buildings, as it was expensive to remove. Anya now understood the truth. The system hadn't been attacked. It had activated itself. But something was wrong. The protocol shouldn't have been activated under these conditions, and most importantly, it shouldn't have locked out the personnel inside. In that moment, a terrible possibility formed in her mind. Someone from the inside, had deliberately awakened this old ghost protocol and was using it as a digital cage to isolate the embassy from the outside world. And the only person who could do this, who was old enough to know about the protocol and had high enough authority to manipulate it, had to be Communications Director Thorn. Thorn's plan was simple. He was running a covert operation in the country and wanted to prevent the ambassador from talking to Washington and stopping his operation. He had created a fake cyber attack panic using Protocol Chimera, which he had triggered himself as a shield. His plan was to bury the embassy in silence for 24 hours, complete his operation in the meantime, and then get a promotion by heroically re-establishing communications. Anya knew she couldn't fight against Thorn on this new, hyper-secure network. She had to go back to basics. She found the original physical communication line plans of the embassy, and she discovered what she was looking for. The embassy was still physically connected to the city's old copper telephone lines, a forgotten vein that Thorn's modern malware would never think to monitor. Anya's mission was now clear: to find that old connection box and establish a communication line with the outside world. This was not the job of an IT technician, but of a spy. Anya quietly left the server room. Her journey took her from the bright corridors of the embassy to the unused, cobweb-covered maintenance tunnels. With every step, she had to avoid modern security sensors. As she passed through the corridors patrolled by Thorn's men, she held her breath, hiding in a ventilation shaft. After hours of searching, she found it. In a forgotten storage room on the lowest floor of the building, there was an old, cast-iron telephone connection box on the wall. She took out her laptop and a custom-made old dial-up modem from her bag. Her hands were trembling as she connected the alligator clips to the old copper wires. This was like putting a message in a bottle in a digital ocean. Meanwhile, in the CIC, Thorn had noticed that Anya was not at her post. A small, unexplained power drain from the basement caught his attention. "That girl," he whispered. "She's up to something." Thorn took 2 security guards with him and ran towards the basement. When Anya heard the slow dialing sound, she was filled with hope. The connection was being established, but it was very slow. She had to send a single, pre-prepared data packet to her outside server. The diagnostic log showing that Protocol Chimera had been activated from inside the embassy, from Thorn's own terminal. Just as she was about to hit the send button, the storage room door was kicked open. Thorn and his men burst in. "Game over, Sharma," Thorn said, pointing his gun at her. But Anya was smiling. "No," she said, "it's just beginning." And she hit the button. The data packet, through that slow, analog line, reached a special CIA cybersecurity unit in Langley in seconds. The analysts there understood the message instantly. This was a rebellion signal from inside the embassy. Using their own back doors, they directly reached the commander of the Marine Security Detachment at the embassy. When the commander learned of Thorn's betrayal, he gathered his team. As Thorn approached Anya, he heard the sound of combat boots from the corridor behind him. When he turned around, he saw the Marines pointing their weapons at him. The game was indeed over. A few minutes later, the massive screens in the CIC came back to life. The secure line with Washington was established. Ambassador Thompson and CIA Station Chief Mason personally went down to the basement to find Anya. There was a new expression of respect on their faces. "How did you do it, Ms. Sharma?" the ambassador asked. Anya pointed to the old, thick copper cable on the wall. "Sometimes the oldest lines are the most reliable, sir." Thorne's arrest didn't end the story. It just peeled back the first layer of a deeper, more dangerous conspiracy. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Thorne was not acting alone. He was just a pawn in a larger extremist group called Praetorian, nested within the intelligence agencies who found traditional diplomacy weak and wanted to pursue a more aggressive foreign policy. Their activation of Protocol Chimera was not just to silence the ambassador, but to trigger a series of events that would start a war with the host country. Anya was no longer a help desk girl. She was the key witness and expert at the center of a conspiracy. CIA Station Chief Mason invited her to Langley. Mason's office was very different from the server room in Viridia. Glass walls, state-of-the-art screens. Anya felt like a stranger in this new world. "We want you to work with us, Anya," Mason said. "Praetorian is still out there, and you're the only one who understands their digital language." Anya hesitated. She didn't want to play spy games. But Mason insisted. "This is not a choice. They see you as a threat. You're either the hunter or the hunted." The Praetorian group sent an assassin to eliminate Anya. But Anya was no longer alone. Mason and his loyal team were protecting her. The story was no longer just a cyber thriller, but a spy war in which Anya was fighting for her survival. Anya knew that the only way to stop Praetorian was to crash their communication network. But they weren't using any modern networks that Anya knew. They were using a technology that was even older, that even she had forgotten. Anya worked for weeks in the CIA's digital archives, searching for the leader of Praetorian. Finally, she found a lead. She was shocked to learn that the leader was her old professor, who had mentored her at the university years ago. This was not just a betrayal, it was a personal betrayal. The professor knew about Anya's old thesis on analog lines, and was now using it for his own purposes. The final confrontation took place at an abandoned radio telescope facility in the Scottish countryside. The Praetorian group was planning to send a signal from here that would crash the global satellite networks. Anya and Mason's team were there to stop them. In the misty, windy landscape of Scotland, the giant, rusted radio telescope stretched towards the sky like the tombstone of ambition. When Anya arrived, she understood why her professor had chosen this place. This was a place the world had forgotten, just like himself. Finally, Anya confronted the leader of Praetorian, her old professor. The man was waiting for her in the telescope's control room, surrounded by the hum of servers. "Anya," he said, his voice calm and filled with disappointment. "I'm not surprised to see you here. You were always my brightest student." "And you were always the most dangerous teacher," Anya replied. "Dangerous? I'm a visionary," the professor said. "I'm trying to bring order to this chaotic, weak world. As you understand, you know the flaws of the system better than anyone. Join me. Together we can fix it." In Anya's mind, a lesson the professor had taught years ago in class came to life. The paradox of control, the professor had said. The desire for perfect control inevitably leads to the system's collapse. Anya had never forgotten this lesson. "You don't want to fix it," she said. "You want to control it. And that, as you taught, is the biggest flaw." To stop him, she used not her brilliant encryption skills but her most basic knowledge. She planted a simple but unstoppable logic bomb in her professor's system. This was the first lesson her professor had taught her years ago. And this lesson was his end. The system destroyed itself in its own contradictions. When the war was over, Anya rejected the job offer from the CIA. She didn't want to be an agent. She was just an engineer who understood the language of systems. But she now knew that sometimes even the quietest technicians have to fight the wars that change the fate of the world.